Hello and welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Volodymyr Viatrovych. Every year in July, Polish media and politicians bring up the painful moments in Polish history during World War II. In 1943, thousands of ethnic Poles were murdered in the region of Volhynia, current territory of Ukraine. While the blame is on the Western Ukrainian nationalist movement of that time, this was a war, and Western Ukraine was part of Poland. This forced the Ukrainian nationalist movement to fight several enemies at the same time: the Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, and the Polish rulers. How do the 70-year-old events affect the present-day relations between Ukraine and Poland? Join me now to discuss is the director of Ukrainian Institute for National Memory, Mr. Volodymyr Viatrovych. Mr. Viatrovych, welcome to Ukraine Today.
Hello. Mr. Viatrovych, the history of Polish-Ukrainian relations has been on top of the agenda in Poland during the last several weeks. In your opinion, why is this happening now? Or has these questions always been on the agenda of Polish society?
First of all, we need to understand that Poland is a very peculiar country. Its citizens are much more interested in their history than anyone else in their own history, Ukrainians, for example, or any other neighboring countries. It is a country which is very interested in its own history. One of the drawbacks here is that very often history questions of the past, and this is exactly the case with the Ukrainian-Polish conflict, which starting from the early 2000s, from time to time, pops out on the political agenda.
You said from time to time, are there certain tendencies when this matter becomes on top of the agenda in Poland?
Yes, whenever we get closer to the anniversary of July 11's events, which took place in 1943, when there was a spike in the Polish-Ukrainian conflict, these questions get on the political agenda in Poland. In 2003, this question got found its way in Polish media for the first time, and since then, every 5 or 10 years, this issue is being brought up first of all by the media, then by the politicians and the rest of the Polish society. Unfortunately, the further we get from 2003, the less historical this matter becomes. This year, in 2016, despite the fact there is no big anniversary of this conflict on Volhynia region, the matter has been highly politicized. Most likely because the current ruling coalition in Poland is right-wing, which came to power, among others, by means of playing this history card of Ukrainian-Polish relations. And a majority of the electorate of the ruling coalition parties, Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, and especially such radical parties as Kukiz and PSL, are the direct successors of those who were the victims of Polish-Ukrainian conflict, the so-called Krysowiaks. And these political parties are those who politicize this matter.
You said
that unfortunately no one listens to the historians in this matter. But both in Ukraine and in Poland there are institutes of national memory, and Ukrainian Institute renewed its work recently, and there were even a number of bilateral meetings between the members of these two institutes. So why no one listens to your voice?
Absolutely right. Such meetings take place. The cooperation between the two institutes of national memory is in progress. Moreover, last year, our both institutes initiated the establishment of the Polish-Ukrainian Historians Forum, which consists of 12 historians who specialized in this subject, who specifically study Polish-Ukrainian conflict during the Second World War, and this forum has already had 2 sessions. The next meeting will take place in Kyiv in October, and the subject matter of this meeting will be the Volhynia events of 1943. Exactly those matters which are being politicized right now. They believe they should be the first ones to interpret those events.
So the problem is that they don't listen, or they don't want to listen to you?
I firmly believe that the question of Polish-Ukrainian conflict during the Second World War still needs a very thorough research. Most of the Polish politicians believe that everything has already been researched and everything has already been said by the historians, and now it's up to the politicians to talk. I strongly disagree. I believe that everything which the politicians from both sides had to say was said back in 2003. I would like to remind that back in 2003, in the village of Pawlivka, there was a joint unveiling of the monument by 2 presidents, Kwasniewski and Kuchma. In 2003, there was a joint resolution adopted by both parliaments. Therefore, the politicians have put this matter to rest back in 2003. Further on, the historians should continue their work. Since we are talking here about war crimes, perhaps there should be a separate investigation into the alleged war times, which took place at that time. They should identify the exact crimes, name the criminals, and identify the victims. Instead, what is happening now is a media frenzy around this subject.
В сучасних умовах, коли в Україні відбувається війна.
Now there is a war taking place in Ukraine, and Russia has become a security threat not just in Eastern Europe, but for the entire European continent. And Poland will be the first country on Russia's path towards Europe. Why do the Polish and Ukrainian politicians do not wish to unite with each other against a common enemy, but rather continue this fight over history?
Об'єднатися супроти одного ворога, а продовжують оцю історичну боротьбу між собою.
На жаль, змушений сказати, що не хоче об'єднатися якраз польські політики, тому що з українського боку...
Unfortunately, I should say that it's the Polish politicians who do not wish to unite, because from the Ukrainian side, there were numerous attempts to reconcile. Even this year, there was a request addressed to the Polish parliament to make the similar joint declaration as in 2003 on this matter and finally close it. A few weeks ago, there was a meeting between the speakers of both parliaments in Western Ukraine, and the speaker of the Ukrainian parliament, Mr. Paruby, was arguing that the historical questions should not divide our two nations, taking into account the current-day events and overall situation, because the threat, which is currently hanging over Ukraine, is not only in fact hanging only about Ukraine, it's also hanging about Poland as well. Unfortunately, the right-wing Polish politicians, which see Russia as their main threat as well, which gained the popularity among their voters because of the Russian threat, right now seem to have lost any outside political vision. In reality, these historical discussions harm Ukrainian-Polish relations a lot and may hinder all previous achievements of the political relations between Ukraine and Poland. But currently, Polish politicians continue raising these questions. They want to recognize the anti-Polish activities of the Ukrainian Resurrection Army as genocide, thus shifting resulting in totally incorrect one-sided responsibility of the Ukrainians for this conflict, and also thus hiding the crimes of Polish resistance movement against Ukrainians.
Якщо ми говоримо про праві організації в Польщі.
Now that we're talking about the right-wing parties in Poland, which stir up this matter, it's not a secret that Moscow is supporting and financing a number of right-wing parties and movements across Europe. Is there a chance that Moscow is behind the right-wing parties in Poland as well, in particular to keep up this matter on the Polish political agenda?
В Польщі, зокрема, з метою підтримання цього конфлікту і роздмухування цього питання.
Безперечно, певну роль в цій ескалації відіграють і різного...
Absolutely. Russian propaganda and Russian agents play an important role in keeping stirring up confrontation around this issue, and Russians will be the first ones to benefit from the deterioration of Ukrainian-Polish relations. But at the same time, should there be direct and clear messages from the Polish politicians that they want to resolve this issue and not continue stirring up, then any such provocations would be fruitless. But unfortunately, the Polish politicians continue using this matter for their political purposes, and this only increases anti-Ukrainian sentiment in Poland. And today, we're already witnessing the results of such anti-Ukrainian sentiment. Just a few weeks ago, Polish right-wing activists attacked a traditional march of the Ukrainians in the Polish town of Przemysl, and then the border guards refused entry into Poland for the Ukrainian rock band, which had nothing to do with the conflict and which never made any statements on this matter. And in the midst of the increase of this anti-Ukrainian sentiment, which is being fueled by the Polish politicians, any Russian provocations are very easily absorbed and very difficult to detect. Therefore, we cannot blame only Russian propaganda in the worsening of relations between Ukrainians and Poles.
На вашу думку, що повинна
In
робити?
your opinion, what should Ukrainian government do to settle this conflict between Ukrainians and Poles?
Я думаю, що українська влада зробила...
I think the Ukrainian government has done quite a lot for this already, and the offer several weeks ago to adopt a joint declaration by both parliaments is a confirmation to that. The declaration was supposed to set a joint commemoration day for the victims of Polish-Ukrainian conflict. And this is exactly the direction we're supposed to move in. Unfortunately, this offer offer has not yet been accepted by the Polish parliament.
What is your opinion on the fact that President Poroshenko knelt down in front of the monument to the victims of the Volhynian tragedy?
I think it's a strong move of a strong politician, but unfortunately, it has not yet been given due credit, first and foremost in Poland.
But
at the same time, just a few days after that, Kyiv City Council renamed one of the avenues in Kyiv after Stepan Bandera. Don't you think such a move adds fuel to the fire?
First of all, there is no connection between Bandera and Ukrainian-Polish conflict. Because in 1943, when there was a peak in this conflict, Stepan Bandera was in Nazi concentration camp. He was there together with the leader of the Polish insurgent movement, Stefan Rowecki, and according to the reports, they made an agreement among themselves. So this is a big illusion.
But you understand very well that only historians know all these details.
But we should understand that if we want to discuss some sort of reconciliation, we should debunk all sorts of myths and stereotypes. And one more thing, I don't really imagine any Ukrainian politician commenting on the names of the streets in Poland. Almost every city and town in Poland has an avenue named after the heroes of the Army Krajowa, and the soldiers of this army were killing Ukrainians. We understand too well that they will always be heroes for the Polish people. We understand too well that for the Ukrainians, they could be criminals. This is our history.
Пане Вікторович, ми вже говорили трошки про роль вашого інституту в
Mr. Viatrovych, we have already discussed a bit the role of your institute in this matter. Do you believe your institute should be doing more in these questions? Perhaps greater information campaign to bring all these historic facts to greater public view?
Absolutely. Ukrainians still know very little about these events, and the Polish-Ukrainian Forum we have discussed earlier is only one of the tools to bring more information on this subject to the people in Ukraine. Another step, which we have done recently, we posted online 380 documents of the Ukrainian insurgent movement about the Ukrainian-Polish conflict. These documents show various sides of Polish-Ukrainian conflict, in particular the cooperation between the two sides, negotiations, and even joint activities of Polish and Ukrainian insurgent movements. Obviously, there is a lot to be done here in Ukraine for our people to know more about Ukrainian history and about various aspects of Ukrainian-Polish relations. And not only Ukrainians will benefit from that. Our Polish neighbors will benefit as well. A lot of Ukrainians first heard the term Volhynia massacre from Russian propaganda, hence a lot of them treat this with a certain degree of skepticism and another fake from the Russian media. Therefore, we need more discussions on that, and obviously the Institute of National Memory will take an active role in that.
Чи бачите ви подібну зацікавленість?
Do you see the same degree of interest among your Polish colleagues to bring these historic facts to their citizens?
Мені здається, що в Польщі трошки інша ситуація. У Польщі можна говорити про певне перенасичення.
I think Poland is in a bit different position. Poland is overwhelmed with disinformation, and very often this historic information was shortened, simplified, and sensationalized for the media to pick it up and spread around. Very often, a very complex historic event was presented in very simple terms. Therefore, the Polish people formed their opinion about this conflict not based on the historic facts, but rather based on the tabloid media, based on short TV stories, which obviously cannot explain comprehensively everything that happened. Therefore, I believe that right now our Polish colleagues have a problem where they lack the in-depth analysis and scientific research works on this matter. True, there was a lot of material and information about this, but for many years there hasn't been any significant scientific research work of the Polish scientists on this.
Навіть польського автора.
З вашої точки зору, що потрібно зробити?
From your perspective, what are the priorities for the reconciliation between the two nations?
Ми набрали якихось позитивних обертів.
Я думаю, в першу чергу залишити цю тему.
First of all, leave the subject for the historians. The politicians have done enough in this regard. Moreover, even the public opinion leaders this year exchanged letters with the only correct message: we forgive and ask forgiveness. These letters were signed by former Ukrainian presidents and church leaders. In response, the Poles sent a similar letter signed by former Polish presidents, prime ministers, and ministers. This is the type of reconciliation on the level of public figures which took place. And historians should keep working. Historians can and should argue because the argument among the historians is something which brings us closer to better understanding of the past events, whereas the arguments among the politicians about the past events is a rather dangerous weapon.
Understood. Well, we can only wish you best of luck in your future work, and thank you very much for finding the time to come and talk to us.
We were discussing the topic of difficult relations between Ukrainians and Poles during World War II and the ways to reconcile the two nations at present day, together with the director of Institute for National Memory of Ukraine, Mr. Volodymyr Viatrovych. I'm Volodymyr Sologub. Thank you for watching Ukraine Today.